Okay, hi everybody. My name is Tim Jackson. I'm the president of Jackson Leadership Inc., a Toronto-based consulting firm. We focus on providing advisory services on executive leadership development for dynamic and high-performance companies. I'm really excited to be joined today by Owen Matthews. So Owen is a successful technology investor and entrepreneur. He's the managing partner of a venture capital fund called Emend Vision Fund, which focuses on sustainability enhancing and climate tech investments. He's also the chairman of the Alacrity Foundation, which is a program designed to incubate and develop startup technology companies. And the program, which originally started, I think, on a fairly small scale in Western Canada only, has been so successful over the last number of years that it's been expanded to many countries across the globe. And then last but not least, because Owen is a talented guy and he wears many different hats, he's also a general partner at Wesley Clover, which is another primarily technology-focused investment firm located in Ottawa. I also wanted to say, just in terms of a preamble here, that one of the reasons I wanted to speak with Owen is that he has considerable experience not only as a successful leader, growing and developing and building up his own company, but he's also taught and mentored many founders and CEOs over the years as an investor. So he has not only direct experience as a leader, but also a vantage point of assisting and coaching and helping leaders develop. So I wanted to kind of pick his brain on some of that accumulated experience that he has from those different vantage points and that well-rounded perspective. I also wanted to speak with Owen because I read an interview that he had done back in 2016 in which he talked about leadership and culture and his views on those two different topics. And I found that his comments to be quite profound and quite insightful. So I want to dig a little bit deeper with him on those two topics and the intersection of leadership and culture. So Owen, thank you so much for being here and being willing to share your perspective with me, with other executives that might be watching and listening, and also with the broader business community.
Hi, Tim. Thanks so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to me and all the wonderful things you said about me. I'm sure there are a number of people who would disagree with you.
Well, you know what? I try to give a little bit of background sketch on what you've done in your career, but actually, the first question I want to ask you was just if you could tell us in your own words a little bit about your story. So, like I said, you've been an entrepreneur, a venture capitalist, an investor, a teacher, and mentor to many leaders. But I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your career journey in your own words and some of the major milestones you've experienced along the way.
Well, you missed a fun one, which probably isn't in my bio, but I had the pleasure of going to the Oscars. What was it, a month or so ago? I was an executive
Wow!
producer on a film called The Brutalist that was
Wow!
nominated for 10 Oscars and won three of them.
Wow! Well,
So
congratulations.
somehow I got caught up in that, probably, a bit of leadership training, but anyway, I ended up involved in a very successful Hollywood film. That is, not typically something that you find in a tech entrepreneur's bio.
You're even more versatile than I imagined. That's impressive. Okay, thanks for mentioning that. You didn't, yeah, I didn't know that about you. That's
You gotta
pretty
keep,
pretty
gotta keep
incredible.
things gotta keep things interesting. Right. So I started my career. We'll go to the normal technology entrepreneur stuff that I'm known for. Um,
Mhm.
I was in university and I started a technology company, a software company that ended up listed on Nasdaq. Was pretty successful. I ended up, because I was in university, I felt that supporting 100 employees and growing a company was more important than finishing my degree. So I ended up leaving school and concentrating on the business. But I
Mhm.
said it did very fairly well.
Mhm.
I ended up leaving management for that company, and then I was tasked by Wesley Clover, which is a family office based in Ottawa, to build a portfolio out on the West Coast where I lived. But I didn't have a lot of resources to do that. The task was build a portfolio, find a way to do it, and it wasn't like I was handed a large investment fund and said, you can deploy capital. So
Mhm.
without that, without the resources, I did look at what we did have at Wesley Clover, which was a very large portfolio of technology companies, predominantly in the UK and in Ottawa. and that's an incredible source of information. So what I did was I formed something called the Alacrity Foundation, which is about 15 years old now, and that was hiring engineering grads. So we would look for top of class, soon to graduate grads, encourage them to be entrepreneurs. They in general were not entrepreneurs. Were engineering grads thinking about what they were going to do for a job.
Yeah.
We encouraged them to join a program with me, partnered with universities in Western Canada, to to learn how to be entrepreneurs. They got a master's out of it, but their master's was really spending a year and a half, 2 years with me building a company. And those companies that we started from scratch were very successful. There was only about a dozen of them, and somewhere between 7, 8 years ago and today, they've all increased in value such that their valuations are about $1.5 billion. These are companies started from scratch with people that had no entrepreneurship experience, and the reason they were able to increase in value so quickly was we used the market knowledge from the portfolio that we had in the UK and in Ottawa and a few other places, but predominantly that's where the companies were. And we took that market knowledge and we brought them to the engineers. So the engineers, who joined the program, they know how to build product. They don't know anything about raising money. They don't know anything about leadership. They don't know anything about, taking products to market and all that kind of stuff. So that all had to be taught, but they did understand how to build product. And these are people who took very difficult subjects. So they were, they're smart and hardworking people. And we were able to take, that sort of raw ingredient and create some very successful companies that I said were worth a significant amount of money today. So that model was on the path to being successful. So Wesley Clover felt that was a very successful way to build a portfolio of technology companies. So we expanded it. We did a program called LSpark in Ottawa, which was very similar to what we did out on the West in Canada. Then we expanded in the UK, into France, into India, into Mexico, into Turkey, and there were a few others planned, but those were the major ones.
Hmm. And how many countries are you in now with Alacrity?
So
Last I read, it's like over 10, I think. But
yeah,
but
there
maybe
are a
that's
few.
out of date.
Some of them are quite small. Like there are sort of
Okay.
programs where we're waiting for funding or waiting for the partnership with the university. So it's hard to call them real programs when you don't have portfolios yet. Uh,
Right.
so so they're planned, but not necessarily in production.
Mm, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing the Alacrity story. And also, I mean, I could probably talk to you for an hour about your experience running a business while you were a student. Um, Maybe I'll have to hold on to that and talk to you at some other point because I'm personally curious about that story in terms of that juggling act. Did you want to say anything about the Emend Vision Fund and how that got started and in your sort of
Sure,
experience getting into that?
sure. So over the past 7 or 8 years, Alacrity had expanded greatly from just its initial program of creating companies
Yeah.
and expanded into running all kinds of interesting programs. So we did a very large plastic reduction program. So we had a grant program of about $25 million, and we can give grants to businesses to reduce source plastics in manufacturing. So if you are using plastic packaging or using plastic in your product, if there's
Hmm.
a way in which we can give you a grant to, set up a machine that allow you to use it in cardboard or change a process, there's plastic used in the process or in the packaging, then we can give you the grant uh, to impact the pulling plastics out of manufacturing.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting program that we ran. We still run that program. So we also ran a program where we gave grants. I think it was about $45 million. We gave grants to businesses to get them up and running on digital marketing. So
Hmm.
so teaching them how to acquire customers in a digital way. making basically making companies more competitive in an environment where lots of people are searching for products online, and there's still many traditional businesses that don't understand how to do that. So really, Alacrity over the past 7 or 8 years has been it sort of had two sides. One focused on environmental action, things like the plastic program, or pulling plastics out of in remote communities, things like that. Big focus on helping clean tech companies, climate tech companies sell their products around the world to make them more successful. Again, focused on helping to acquire customers, but in support of climate tech, and then just broadly how to acquire customers and making companies more competitive. So training people in digital marketing. So because of our work in supporting climate action, we were connected to a whole pile of amazing companies. We were helping them sell product around the world. We were using our global footprint to support companies making sales in territories where they wouldn't have salespeople. So if you were a company in Western Canada that might be doing really interesting work, in climate, you know, you wouldn't have a salesperson in India, and you're unlikely to get a customer in India. Well, if we have people on the ground there, then we can help you make sales, and it generates a really significant amount of amount of impact for small companies being able to sell and market their products around the world. So we were responsible for something like $400 or $500 million in attracting capital into clean tech companies. And we're responsible for something like a couple of $100 million, like $200 or $300 million in sales for companies selling around the world. So sort of important impact. And that work led us to understanding a market, very much like how I started Alacrity. Understanding a market is the most important thing to making a successful company. Well, we began to understand a market. We were selling on behalf of a pile of clean tech companies. We understood what the market was looking for, so it made sense that we would become investors in that space. We had lots of deal flow. We saw lots of companies. Lots of companies were coming to us for grants. Lots of companies were coming to us, looking for help selling their products around the world. So we had access to all kinds of interesting companies, and that led to us understanding a market and understanding the potential of the market. And our thesis for the Emend Fund is incredibly simple. There is enormous demand in the very big industries like construction materials, uh, energy sector, electrification, agriculture, water treatment. You take these, critical infrastructure, take these very large industries. They would like to behave better, but they don't really have the innovation to do it. So for us, it's the best, venture investment opportunity we've ever seen. It's big industries with lots of capital to deploy, big purchasing power. So very interesting from a financial aspect. It's very good to make money when there's a big industry, lots of big industries that are in disruption. So they're under enormous pressure to change, shareholder pressure, regulatory pressure, employee pressure. They all want the company to behave better and not ruin the environment. So great news from a sort of investment perspective. Then when it comes to impact, the fastest way that you can impact, say global warming, among many of our climate challenges, is to support the industries that are creating the vast majority of the damage. If you can work with them and help them, then you make a very quick difference. And when you sell product, all of the economics are there for you to be incented to push harder and push harder and push harder. So if you take the right product to market, you can make a huge difference, in the impact. I like, not that I like to pick on, a particular technology as good or bad, but I look at hydrogen, and it has great promise, but the infrastructure doesn't exist. So if I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
pick a 20-year time horizon where we're in the middle of a climate emergency, temperatures are rising and really bad things can happen, right? So you take that 20-year, time horizon. The impact hydrogen can make on that is about zero, right? It's just the infrastructure doesn't exist for you to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
However, if as an example, look at the oil and gas sector and you reduce the methane that the oil and gas sector leaks, just 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 methane, right? Just for oil and gas leaks, that greenhouse gas is bigger than all carbon combined. So
Mm-hmm.
every ship, every transport ship, every car on the road, every like you could convert every car on the road to electric or hydrogen, and you'd have less of a difference than just the methane leaks from oil and gas. So, if you bring technology to the big industry and you're able to scale it quickly, because that's what, technology entrepreneurs do, they get products out to the market, they scale them quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Your impact can be short. It can be a short number of years. And, I mean, hypothetically or, theoretically, you can say, well, hydrogen's better long term. Sure, but we have to get there. And the
Mm-hmm.
impact that you can make in the very short term with large industries who are desperate for change and are under a lot of disruption is a very, very good opportunity to make money and an incredible opportunity to have climate impact. So
Mm.
that led us to the Emend Fund, which is an early stage, fund for industrial transformation.
So you had this market knowledge about related to clean tech, sustainability industries. You had some infrastructure that existed through Alacrity and channels to provide training and support, and maybe even access to networks and markets. And then you combine that with this incredible need in the marketplace, especially among big industries that are, they have the ability to invest in or maybe purchase services related to clean tech, and to they're motivated and they feel that societal, regulatory, even employee pressure to do so. And so that sounds like you had a bunch of these different variables kind of coming together and intersecting in the middle of the Venn diagram. And then in the middle sits a fund like yours, which is trying to address all those needs and bring all those things together.
You also have one great advantage, which is market timing, right? You've got,
Yeah.
3 years ago, tech companies were riding high and had very, very high valuations, which as an investor means that you're buying high, which isn't great. You go to today and, there's a lot more economic pressure. There's a lot less capital floating around, which means you're getting much better deals, and you're helping early stage companies get farther along with your capital.
Mm.
So, it's a great environment to be investing these days because there's less money splashing around, and as a result, you're more likely to get reasonable valuations for technology companies.
Mm. Okay. Okay, great, Owen. Thanks so much for walking me and the listeners through that. And it's I'm a bit amazed at your career story and just how many different things you've been involved with, the diversity of experiences. Like I said, the direct experience in leadership and building a business, but also now in investing, and also the climate tech sustainability focus is something that I think is appealing and aspirational and inspirational for many people to hear about. So thanks for walking me through that. I wanted to pivot towards culture now, if I could, and just asking you a little bit about your views on culture. And as I mentioned in the preamble, one of the reasons that I was really interested to speak with you was because I read an interview that you posted, or that somebody posted on the Alacrity Canada website back
Mhm.
in 2016.
Mhm.
And in it, you mentioned how you value culture in a company more heavily than its financials when trying to judge its prospects or predict its future success. And I was wondering if I could just kind of read a quote from that interview just to situate us and anchor us in terms
Mhm.
of the idea that kind of caught my attention. So here's the quote. So, quote, culture is always the most important thing. Is the team willing to change their minds if it's in the best interest of the company, or are they most interested are they most concerned about self-interest? Are they working hard because they're dedicated and passionate about what they're doing? And this is the part that really caught my attention. So at its core, the details of the company are less interesting to me than the approach of the people who are in that company. How people in the company are treated is more telling to me than the revenue run rate. I've seen good revenue run rate businesses evaporate because they lose their culture as they grow. If the culture is wrong, great team members don't feel appreciated and either leave or are unduly limited in their contributions. So I look at culture first and foremost. So, Owen, can you tell me a bit about what makes you value culture so much when evaluating the prospects of a business?
Sure. I mean, it's not complicated to understand that a CEO of one is unlikely to make a massive impact on the world or run a successful business, right? So
Yeah.
so the CEO can try to do everything themselves, but they're severely limited in their opportunity to grow. And you're not really a CEO, you're a sole proprietor or you're something else. If you're in a company with employees, and it's a decent sized company, then you can reasonably and with a straight face call yourself a CEO. And the truth is, that person, uh, if they're not cultivating, a good culture, then they're unlikely to succeed for very long because they can't do it all themselves. So who do you get, to help you? And are those people working, the extra hours necessary
Mm-hmm.
to make a company successful? And you know, if you attract lots of capital and you're throwing money around and there's you've got lots of employees and that kind of thing, is that really in the best interest of the company? And is that really going to help the company grow? The truth is, people, if they're not working very hard, and you might have 10 employees that you're spending money on and blowing company money, or 20 employees, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and you might find that actually five would work harder and be more effective. And layers of management don't help you. In fact, they slow you down. A small and focused team that's highly motivated. In fact, my entire career, every company that was successful was a small and motivated team that was able to take on a much larger and better resourced company. And
Mm-hmm.
that comes down to is one sort of simple understanding that if you're working hard and you're passionate about what you're doing, then you're much more likely to succeed, regardless of how many more employees a competitor has, or even if you're choosing to hire more employees, you might be better off with fewer as long as they're the right people. And
Yeah.
the feeling is that if we're all in it together and the CEO recognizes that they rely on their team and they respect their team, and the team in turn can speak up and get things done. When you empower people, say when I was a CEO, if I'm empowering you to make a decision, you're just going to make it. And if you make a mistake, we can talk about it. We can say, all right, well, let's recognize that was a mistake, but I appreciate you taking initiative. You've learned something. Carry on. Better that you can all decide and you can all, operate and do your job than
Mm-hmm.
waiting to be told what to do. And if I'm a CEO and I've got a staff of maybe more people, five versus 10, so I've got 10 people, and I'm telling them what to do all the time, I may feel like a boss, but I really have to wrap my head around 10 people's jobs and know better than all 10 people in all circumstances. And
Mm-hmm.
that just actually doesn't make sense. Perhaps it makes sense with 10 people. It certainly doesn't make sense with 100 people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have a culture where you're empowering people, you're running around trying to understand every decision that needs to get made. And
Yeah.
there's no way you can make the right decision in all circumstances with all 100 people who were hired with experience to do a job. So
Mm-hmm.
hopefully they know better, how to do that job than you do. And your
Mm-hmm.
job is to empower them to make decisions
Mm-hmm.
within a reasonable framework, right? It's like if you're digital marketing, make decisions around digital marketing. That's why you're employed to do it.
Right.
And you're going to feel empowered. You're going to be motivated, and you're going to be making decisions all day long that are within the scope of your work. And you're going to be talking to your colleagues, and you're going to be empowered to make decisions all day long. And the organization thrives. as a
Mm,
result of people being empowered, wanting to work harder because they're empowered, regardless of what they're paid, right? And feeling they have, autonomy, agency over their career and over their work life.
mhm,
And if mistakes happen, instead of punishing those mistakes, recognize them, acknowledge them, have people come forward and are comfortable coming forward when they've made mistakes. You can address the mistake and you can move on. So it's fun to say, oh, well, fail fast. But if nobody's acting,
mm,
regardless of what the CEO says, nobody's acting to do the function, then you can actually fail quickly, right? And
mhm,
and then move on. If you empower people to make decisions and
mm,
failures occur, you acknowledge them. Like, right, okay, we failed. A mistake happened. Let's acknowledge it. Let's fix it because we can make the mistake quickly, solve the problem, and move forward.
mhm,
You're enabling an organization to move quickly and to punch way above its weight because you're working way harder. If I
mhm,
have agency over my life, I'm going to work way harder. The opposite is if I'm controlling, and if I'm so passionate about the business that I'm angry when things go wrong, nobody's going to admit a mistake. And if you're not admitting mistakes, then mistakes are hidden. If mistakes are hidden, they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and uh,
yeah,
and suddenly you wonder where all the money went, or you wonder why there's a lawsuit you didn't know about, or why you lost a major customer,
mhm,
and you weren't made aware of it. It's because you're punishing failure, right?
mhm,
So it seems like a relatively laid back strategy to acknowledge people making mistake and support them through their mistakes. But the truth is, they'll come to you when they have a challenge or there's a complicated problem, and you're empowered to solve the problem within a broader context because you're supporting, say, 100 people in that environment.
mhm,
So for me, it's obvious, that you can't always be right. You have to empower people to do the job properly,
mhm.
and encouraging them with alacrity, a great English word, very cheerful readiness, So
Right.
so let's just get on with it and
Yeah.
support each other and build a team that has a great culture. That ultimately leads to a successful company. If
Mm,
you have I know better than everybody else, either as the CEO or anybody senior in the organization, it sort of cows people to not speak up when you really need them to.
mm,
And for me, it's the culture that drives the
mm,
success. Paying attention to the opportunity, having the whole organization pay attention to the opportunity, and recognizing and being able to change when the opportunity arises comes through conversation and trust. And
mhm,
you don't get that when you're commanding or demanding of people, and you think that you're being a strong CEO. The truth is you're ruining the culture and you'll lose your best people. So I don't know if that answered the question
yeah.
in a way that was clear, but to make it as simple as possible, culture is what drives the innovation, and to have a team in a small company with limited resources, you know, go after a really big problem. The only way to do it is with a highly focused small team that's working incredibly hard.
Mm,
And they only do that when they're
mm,
connected to you and your passion, and they're
yeah.
respected and empowered to do it.
Mm. Okay, that's really that's a nice succinct way to tie that up. I was thinking, seems to me that some of the key themes that you're talking about are, strong cultures drive energy and motivation and working hard and being passionate, which is something that's probably, really vital, especially in these ventures that you're investing in. They allow you to economize the size of the team. If you have a strong culture, you can have say a group of five instead of a group of 20 that's working very hard, and they can achieve perhaps more than the group of 20. because they're all tightly knit and working well together. I also hear you talk about the inefficiency of a poor culture. So, a leader who is going to be commanding and maybe authoritarian, they just don't have time to make all the decisions. They don't have the intelligence or the life experience to make decisions in all the variety of different areas that they may be asked to make decisions in. So they need to rely on a broader team.
And
Um,
worse than that, Tim, if the employees aren't speaking up and they're not empowered, they don't work very hard,
yeah,
right? So if I'm being told what to do and I have no agency,
yeah,
I'm just gonna wait around until I'm told what to do,
yeah.
right? Which is terrible from an efficiency perspective.
Right. Excuse me. That's yeah, just kind of showing up and just saying, well, you tell me, being very passive and sort of your disposition, not proactive. That was the other theme that I was really picking up on in your comments was the notion of having dialogue, being able to speak up, having agency, and then feeling empowered, I guess relates to agency, just having a sense that I can act, I can decide, I don't have to wait to be told. And then yeah, that notion of like being willing to say something if you see a problem so that it doesn't
Mhm.
become a huge problem. Like you could address it when it's small. It doesn't explode onto the CEO or the founder's desk at some point and become existential as a threat.
Yeah, if
Did
I
you want to
figure
add
if I,
something?
if I'm doing my job, if I'm trying to, if I wanted to create a metaphor to
Yeah.
to make it as simple as possible, if I'm doing my job really, really well as a CEO, I'm like a firefighter, right? I'm spending time, encouraging and supporting, the company broadly, right?
Yeah.
I've got lots going on, and I trust the people to do their job. And when something goes wrong because someone has made a mistake, or there is, they're over their head, and whether it's an HR problem or fundraising problem or a customer problem, then I've got to step in and
Hmm.
fix the problem. Well, it means if you're in a busy company, there's lots of problems. You're constantly jumping into lots of problems,
Yeah.
right? But you are trusting the people to do their job, right? If nobody raises the fire alarm, you've got nothing to do,
Hmm.
right? So if I'm in the set of circumstances where everybody's scared to admit that there's a problem, then I don't know where the problems really lie, and I
Hmm.
can't jump in. So when things are going well, I'm busy promoting the company, broadly speaking, talking to customers, understanding the market,
Right.
but things are always going wrong. So you're constantly jumping into, a key person left or a key person, has made a mistake and they need some support,
Hmm.
or I mean, running a company, there's all kinds of very complex problems that occur, and you've got to jump in and sort them out. And
Hmm.
your job as a CEO is to be flexible and think laterally or out of the box or whatever analogy you want to use
Hmm.
to solve complicated problems, because an early stage company, this is things that have this is a market that hasn't been attacked before, or this is a
Hmm.
product that in a technology that hasn't been launched before. It's all new.
Hmm.
So the marketing person maybe has experience, but they haven't been in this market before, or the salesperson hasn't dealt with this vertical that you're going after before, or
Right.
whatever the circumstances are, you know, often it's the CEO's job, the manager's job to jump in and try and sort it
Hmm.
out. And then if you treat your staff that way as you grow, you teach management, the managers treat their staff the same way. And again, they're giving agency to the next layer of employees. Pretty soon you
Hmm.
have an organization where, it doesn't matter if it's 1,000 people, they feel empowered, they feel like they're respected. They can speak up when things go wrong. Those
Hmm.
bigger problems make their way up to, a manager who can solve the problem, right? And if it's a really big problem, it's making its way all the way up to the CEO's desk, who can step in and solve the problem.
Hmm.
From my perspective, the only way to manage. And if you're not managing that way, you're probably going to fail. And what I find interesting, which is why culture is so important to me, which is why Alacrity was named after, the sort of style of culture that I like.
Yeah.
But I
Great.
can't take credit for the name. One of my colleagues, Simon Gibson,
Okay.
came up with it. But I liked it very, very much, and it has formed a key part of our identity. Um,
Mhm.
but I'll tell you what defeats culture, certainly in early stage companies, when you have well, one of the reasons I like early stage companies is because you have the opportunity to set the culture, right? When I was
Yeah.
hiring, grads, we were teaching management from the very beginning, which was able to build a strong culture from the beginning. It's much harder to reset a culture. But
Hmm. Hmm.
one of the things that really defeats cultures in early stage companies is the myths around entrepreneurship, right? So when people read the book about the successful entrepreneur, it was the brilliant idea, that was the moment that changed everything. And of course, it's written in hindsight, by someone who's already very successful, who with ghostwriters who want to make a dramatic moment out of something. And the truth is, you know, uh, the inspirational moment and the drive where I was going to prove to the world that I was right. That's terrible instincts for actually running a company,
Hmm.
right? If I meet a CEO who has that myth in their head, like my idea is the most important thing, and I'm going to rail against the world and prove everybody that I'm right, and well, those are myths. They're not real, and they might be in the biography books, but they're set up to be dramatic or to sound important or to make the successful person sound like they were brilliant in those moments. The truth is, every company that we've ever been involved with that's been successful failed at what they were originally doing. So
Hmm.
so if I came across a CEO who was telling me, I'm going to tell everybody that I'm right and I'm going to push this on the market, it's going to work. I actually have no interest in investing in them, and I don't know any investor that would. Um,
Hmm.
because it's a terrible person to work with, right?
Hmm.
Like I'm not going to listen to the market. I'm not going to listen to customers. I'm not going to listen to my investors. I'm going to show everybody that I'm right. It's like, well, then you're going to fail. That's what's going to happen,
Too
right?
too rigid, too dogmatic, not receptive to information coming
Yeah,
in.
and every customer, sorry, every CEO, if they're not listening to the customer, then they're not going to realize where the market opportunity is. Every
Hmm.
company that we've been involved with that's successful, they went to market with an idea, right? And the idea was actually the least important thing. The most important thing was what's going on in the market, right? Is the
Yeah.
market dynamic? Is there change going on? If you're in an established market, I don't know, banking in Canada, right? It's really hard as a small company to break into an established market where there's no disruption going on. Like
Yeah.
you just it's impossible, right? Whereas if you're in a good market where there's lots of disruption going on, there's lots of opportunity, there's a lot of money splashing around for opportunity,
Hmm.
then what happens is, you can go to the market with your idea, and as you're working on it, you're going to learn a whole pile, right? So the other thing is your heart. You got to have the commitment, right? So as a
Hmm.
team, are you committed to make it work, and you're going to stick together, and you've got the right culture, right? So
Hmm.
you're in the right market, right? There's a lot of money splashing around. There's high values. There's a lot of disruption. So there's an opportunity for a small player to get in, right?
Okay.
And you've got a great team with great culture who are listening and responding and can pay attention. And then you go to market with an idea, and the idea is wrong. And every company I've ever been involved with that's been successful, their first idea was wrong. It didn't work out,
Hmm.
right? But they were paying attention. They got lots of feedback. They were actually talking to customers and trying to solve a problem. And when it didn't work, they learned enough that another door opened, and it was a bigger and better door anyway,
Hmm.
right? So if I was to tell you, my idea is what's important because I read the book and that's what entrepreneurs are supposed to do, and I'm so passionate that I'm going to prove to you that this idea is correct. Well,
Hmm.
given my experience, that's definitely going to fail, as
Hmm.
opposed to someone who is open, recognizing that the market is shifting, recognizing that there's an opportunity, and I've got a highly motivated team, and I've learned so much from being in the market and trying to sell the first thing
Hmm.
that I've created an opportunity for a bigger thing.
Hmm.
So that concept of I'm right, and I'm going to prove to you that I'm right. And that filters down on how management operates is terrible
Right.
for culture. It's
Yes.
terrible for the strategy of the company, and it's it's taken from a myth, which are books written in hindsight by people who are already successful, who are trying to make dramatic moments in their history sound exciting. The truth is, it's not at all that exciting. It's hammering away at a market and understanding what's going on with your customers that leads you to your biggest opportunities.
Hmm. So you're saying that one way that maybe you've seen leaders in culture misstep over the years is being too rigid, too dogmatic, um, unwilling to listen to the market. The market is the most powerful force, and it requires some deference and flexibility in adjusting to the demands of that market. I guess I'm also hearing you say that that the leader's posture on this, call it dogmaticness,
Yeah.
dogmatic kind of viewpoint, that that viewpoint can kind of cascade and create and shape the culture beneath him or her, right? Like
Mhm.
it can cascade down to lower levels, and all of a sudden the organization or the company can be oriented around that mindset, which again
Yeah. If I
you see
think I'm right and I'm telling people what they need to do to execute my vision, then we talked about this earlier. I'm creating a set of circumstances where, they're waiting for instruction as
yeah,
opposed to getting on with the mission. And if I'm
because the leader's
empowering
right
them,
and they know,
yeah,
right?
and that's again fastest path to failure.
Hmm. So if you had to sum up, Owen, the cultural characteristics that you look for in a business that would excite you and make you want to invest in them, work with them, partner with them, like how would you sum that up?
Well, passion is very, very important, right? I have to love what I do. Early stage in particular is an enormous amount of work. Even as an investor, it's an enormous amount of work to
Yeah.
make a company successful. So you really have to love what you do. It's not a 9 to 5 job, right? So you need passion,
Hmm.
without a doubt. You have to be highly motivated, and love shaking things up, love making a difference, right? So someone that's got a lot of energy and really enthusiastic about doing what they do,
Hmm.
and really good, broadly speaking, communicators, right? And I don't mean as an
Yep.
individual. I mean as a team. They're good communicators. They're respectful in how they communicate. Everybody in the organization has something to teach you, and sort of acting important is terrible,
Hmm.
right? You really want to defer to your team as much as possible and earn their respect by making good decisions, and you lead the organization by example, not by telling people what to do. And it's really obvious when you see a team that is sort of command and control,
Hmm.
the entire the entire world has shifted to decentralized, empowering people to make decisions, even the way that we purchase now, right? I am a huge advocate of digital customer acquisition methodologies. It's changed the world in the past 20 years.
Hmm.
And if I have a budget and I've got a job to do in a big company, then I can access all of the available tools, online. I can
Hmm.
make a decision. It's probably not a huge expensive decision. Instead of buying, a giant piece of equipment, I'm going to use it as a SaaS service or something like that. I'm going
Yep.
to put my credit card down, or I'm going to get authorization to spend $1,000 or $10,000 a month or whatever it is, and I can make the decision. So when I'm actively selling as a small company, and I think, oh well, I've got the ear of the CEO. The truth is the CEO isn't pushing a decision down to a senior vice president who's pushing a decision down to a vice president who's talking to a manager who's responsible for that decision. The truth is that manager has already solved the problem, right? So they're going to turn to their vice president who's talking to their senior vice president saying, well, why are you pushing this product on me from someone who the CEO talked to? I
Hmm.
I I already know how to do my job,
Hmm.
right? So you've got these, the tools that used to be complicated sales processes and big purchase orders are much smaller purchases done by people who are actually responsible for the decision and want agency over the decision. So the sort of approach to market has changed dramatically. So you have to create a culture of listening to the actual customer who's cutting the check to you
Mm-hmm.
and reinforcing and paying attention to how they buy and how they use it, actually serving them so that they love the product, and get as many of those as possible in the door, and not trying to sell to the CEO or sell to the CIO or the head of IT. Most of the time, the people are empowered to do their job,
Mm-hmm.
and good organizations are like that. So trying to be a big wheel, talking up, the just senior leadership and thinking it's going to make a difference doesn't really effectively sell anymore. 20 years
Mm-hmm.
ago, I made my career early on doing that kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
Today, if someone says, "Oh, well, I know the CEO of that company and I'll call them," great, but it's actually not going to affect the purchasing decision. The
Right.
purchasing decision is made by the person whose job it is to make that purchasing decision,
Purchasing. Yeah.
and they've got every piece of intelligence available to them.
Yeah.
So if you're not offering up that intelligence in a way that is legitimately helping them out, like, hey, here are the criteria by which you might want to consider doing your job, and here's the way we look at it, and here's what we do to make it
Mm-hmm.
easy for you, then why are you trying to waste resources with a big channel partner or a sales team trying to sell to the senior execs
Mm-hmm.
when really all you have to do is just do a good job and pay attention
Yeah.
to your customer. So the way in which you approach the market has changed dramatically, and teams, even though culturally, I still approach the you know how to invest in a company when I look at the culture the same way. It's way more important now because I, as a CEO, there's no way I can talk to every possible customer. There's no way I can, affect the
Yeah.
digital marketer who is putting the content out that happens to attract the attention of the end customer who's actually in the seat to make the buying decision.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not possible. So,
Mm-hmm.
we think about going to market now as like a machine that you're tinkering with, right? You're putting in content, or you're putting out, whatever LinkedIn campaigns or whatever you're doing. You're doing your marketing to fill the funnel.
Yep.
The funnel is getting, processed down to like actually, getting a purchasing decision, and then you're seeing the engagement rate, you're seeing you're seeing the renewal rate, and you're looking at that, and okay, I've got a machine, I put money in here, which turns into leads, which turns into customers, which turns into, product use.
Mm-hmm.
And how, is the product sticking, and am I keeping the customers, and are they renewing, and am I putting enough features and functions into it that they're upgrading and they like
Mm-hmm.
the product? I mean, you're as a CEO, you're tinkering with a machine. The days of sort of standing on a pulpit and preaching about how great you are and how important the company is just doesn't cut it anymore.
Mm. So I hear you say passion, number one, is really important because you're going to be working on really hard things. It's going to require an incredible amount of work to get this business up and running. So you need to be, sourcing your motivation from a deep wellspring inside of you,
Yeah.
where you feel like you're doing something meaningful. The second theme I'm hearing is like sort of like the CEO needs to have this like non-hero narrative associated with them, like be willing to listen, be somewhat humble, and maybe deferential to their team, but not see themselves as having to be the source or the cause of every decision and every action in the company, the command and control. You want to avoid that type of posture. And then the third thing I'm hearing is this decentralized kind of theme, and you've used the word agency a number of times, but decentralized in terms of decision making, but also decentralized in terms of going to market. Um, the CEO shouldn't be responsible for all of sales. Um, you know, you need to sort of delegate that work out to people, and the buying decisions happen perhaps at a much lower level than the CEO level, right?
Right.
Among purchasing experts. So, um, yeah, so those seem like three really important themes. Can I just ask you one more thing on culture before we pivot to a couple questions on
Sure.
leadership?
Sure.
Um, you talked a moment ago about how culture, like you think it's better to get in with early stage companies because you can set the culture, and it's
Mhm.
much easier to to form the culture that it is, to tinker with it once it's kind of coalesced. How do you think about that when you're like when you're approaching investments? Like, young and dynamic and fast-growing companies probably have a lot of change in personnel. There's probably a lot of cultural evolution that takes place over time. Um, do you do you go into an investment thinking, oh, I see a positive culture here, and I'm going to assume it's going to be relatively durable over time, or, you know what, I'm probably going to assume that it's going to change a little bit as the company and business evolves, and I'm just going to help the CEO kind of manage that evolution and be a steward of, nudging it in a positive direction. I'm just kind of wondering how you think about culture. You assess it initially, you see it's positive. Like, do you assume it's going to be durable, or do you think about just trying to help, manage its evolution?
Yeah. So it's the easiest way to think about it is it really only takes one bad actor to ruin a culture.
Hmm.
And you know, how quickly a management team responds to remove that bad actor, recognize the bad actor and remove them is really important. Now,
Hmm.
ideally, they never get the bad actor in the first place, but it sometimes it's hard to tell. I've had experiences where a strong contributor, an individual contributor, seemed really important to the organization, but was busy destroying the organization because they were, because they were a problem. They were pitting people against each other, and when they're
Hmm.
not, when you could be a really strong contributor and are naturally very, very talented, and you are, but you're really only working quarter time. What does that say to all the other people that are working full time when you could do so much more, but you're not?
Hmm.
Right? Because of arrogance or fiefdom building or whatever it is. So to answer the question, teams change, and paying attention to keeping the culture strong is really important. I often look to who's the most junior person on the team and how are they
Hmm.
treated,
Hmm.
and that's an indicator of sort of what's expected. And if they're respected, and then I can tell the management team are likely to keep bringing in people and treating them in a way that is positive and reinforces the culture.
Yeah.
And if someone is not responding well in that culture, they're likely to remove them,
Hmm.
because if a team are empowered and they recognize that somebody's behaving badly, they can speak up about it.
Hmm.
So if three-quarters of your team speaks up and goes, well, new guy's a bit of a challenge, and new guys maybe a new manager, and we're experiencing challenges there, uh, you know, then you know the fact that they can speak up is important, and the fact that a CEO can hear that message is very important.
Hmm.
And one of the clear signs that you've got a real problem is when three-quarters of the people in your organization can speak up and say they really don't like the person, and a quarter of them love the person. That means
Hmm.
they're absolutely doing what sort of narcissistic people do, which is, feeding and supporting a small group of people and building a fiefdom. And if you wait too long, you're doing a lot of damage to the small team who love the person,
Hmm.
and you're really pissing off the people who see it a mile away. Your team collectively, certainly if you're in an early stage company, are smart and capable, and they're there for a reason. So respect them and respect their opinion on what's happening with the culture, and you'll take a problem out, way earlier if you're listening to your team, as opposed to defending somebody who's new, who is very clearly not fitting into the culture,
Hmm.
regardless of how friendly they look when they're talking to you.
Hmm. Okay, well, it's interesting. Owen, thank you so much. I think we really exhausted this culture topic. There's a lot to talk
Mm.
about, but you've got so much experience. It's really fascinating to hear your perspective on the different angles, and and vantage points around culture. I was wondering if we could just pivot a little bit towards talking about leadership. We've sort of been talking about it through the culture part of the conversation already, but was curious to ask you a couple more questions. So, how do you think leaders should build strong cultures in their businesses? Like, obviously, leaders have a role in terms of shaping culture, and we've been talking around that, I think, a little bit so far. But if you think back to some of the advice that you've given leaders and CEOs in the past, how do you advise them to shape the culture around them?
Yeah, I mean, respect is the most important thing, right? You respect the people who work for you. You give them agency over their job, right?
Yeah.
And you lead by example. And that's not by being decisive, in every domain. It's being decisive in what is in your domain.
Hmm.
I would make it very clear that as a CEO, I have a job, and my job is to, manage investors, to manage a board of directors, and to make strategic decisions. It's not to tell, the guy who cleans the toilets how to do it. He probably knows how to do it way better than I do, right? It's not to tell the marketing manager how to be a good marketing manager.
Hmm.
So if that means that I have as much respect for the marketing manager that they have for me, I'm enabling them to do their job. I'm listening to them on what they can do to improve their numbers or improve their results.
Hmm.
And then I'm empowered to make broad strategic decisions and allocating budgets and stuff like that because that's in my job. Doesn't
Hmm.
make me more important, doesn't make me better as a person, doesn't make me, doesn't give me any right to speak down to you, doesn't give me any right to feel like I have any agency over you other than like I've got a set of decisions I need to make around budgets and strategy, right?
Hmm.
And that's hugely important. Coming in saying, just people default to assume that they're the CEO and therefore they're important. You're not a CEO without a team, right? So
Hmm.
so respect your team and allow them to do their job, and you'll be a much better CEO. So yeah, absolute respect for my team, regardless of where they're from and what they do or what their job function is.
Yeah.
And the more respect I provide, and explain my decision making, right? Like here's the strategic decision that we made.
Yeah.
It can change, but it can't change easily, and that's my responsibility.
Yeah.
Running the marketing campaign is not my responsibility. That's your responsibility, and I hope you do a really, really good job about it, right? And there's no way I'm going to tell you how to do it because it's not my job.
Hmm.
But I respect your job as much as you respect mine. Respect is huge, and then leading by example. You work really, really hard. You make decisions that are respectful to the values of the organization, and if you make a mistake, you own up to it the way you expect your team to.
Mm. Yeah, you mentioned the importance of communication skills a little bit earlier in the conversation. I think you just touched on that again, this idea of like explaining the rationale for decisions. I'm a CEO. This is my envelope or my mandate to make this decision. I'm
Yeah.
going to make it, but I need to explain the rationale and the why and help you understand it so that we can all remain kind of tightly knit in working together. Um, so that seems like that's a really key piece that you look for in terms of skill sets amongst potential CEOs.
Yeah. Also, when you're communicating with your team as a leader,
Yeah.
there will be a group of people who tend not to speak up, and it's your job to make sure that they speak up and they're given a moment to reflect. So almost like
Hmm.
the quietest people in the room are the people you turn to at the end and ask their opinion for the wrap up. And because salespeople or strong communicators will speak up a lot, and you'll
Yep.
hear lots and lots and lots of different ideas and different you'll get lots of engagement. Then the people in the room who are not speaking up,
Yep.
and it's your job to ask them to speak up and say, well, you've sat there quietly listening. You maybe you're a little more introverted, or you're you're a little bit more thoughtful. You're not
Hmm.
just spouting when the question comes up.
Yep.
So now you've had some time to reflect. Tell me what you think, and do that a few times to people who haven't spoken, and
Hmm.
you might get a very strong dissenting opinion, which you should respect,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So actively seeking feedback from those that are quieter, it gives them agency and feels like they're being heard because they're not necessarily the
Yeah.
most comfortable speaking up in an open forum.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I spoke with a senior executive a couple of years ago, and he talked about that exact same phenomenon. And the way I thought about it was in terms of like fast versus slow people. So he said,
Mm.
there's some people that are going to want to debate an issue live in the moment in
Yeah.
very intense ways. But there's another subset in my team that just need soak time. They need time to just go
Mhm.
away and like think about the problem and organize their thoughts.
Mhm.
And if I don't give them time to do that, I'm going to be missing out on whatever contributions they can make. And then I make a poorer
Mhm.
quality decision because I'm not factoring in their viewpoints. So he told me how he eventually learned to give like a 24 or 48-hour period saying, this is a really important decision, but we're not going to make it right now. I want you to go away and think about it. And then he found that the quieter people would come back and they would have these amazing contributions. And he realized that he just had to suspend his need to make the decision in the moment and try to engineer ways to get those people involved and to
Yeah.
contribute. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Similar philosophy.
yeah, I think that's a really great point. I appreciate you making it. Could I ask you a question now about challenging for high performance? So we talked a little bit in the past about how I'm interested in the question of how leaders can challenge, push, and pull their teams to the limit of performance, like to the absolute peak of their capabilities, but in sustainable ways so that they preserve motivation and relationships and culture within their teams. So as someone who's trying to create high performance companies and environments, I was just wondering, Owen, like how do you think about how leaders should challenge their teams to the limit but also do that in ways that they balance maintaining relationships and motivation and culture. Like what comes to your mind when I pose that question?
Um, yeah, I mean, I get a lot of um, questions about work-life balance and the truth is very high performing teams prioritize what they're passionate about, which is their love for work and accomplishing things.
Hmm.
And the most successful teams that I have seen are people who make sacrifices to focus on the thing that they love. And if I hear work-life balance, you know, well, I don't have work-life balance if I'm not doing what I love.
Hmm.
And whatever, family members or who friends or whatever it is, they're going to be quite unhappy with me if I'm not focused on what I'm passionate about. you know
Hmm.
so so I look for people who love what they do,
Hmm.
and they are making sacrifices because they can't help themselves. They love what they do, and that very rarely is a thing. It's like, oh, I'm an engineer and I love building product. More than anything, it's about being on a team of people who respect each other and win. You're a soccer team and you win and you're passionate about it, you love it. Well, the business is not that different, right?
Hmm.
So trying to manufacture a high performing team doesn't really work unless you have the stuff that rewards the people who want to win,
Yeah.
right? So you if you get an extremely talented soccer player who really just isn't that excited about winning because I don't know, they had a bad week or something, they're not really going to help you a whole lot, right?
Right.
Whereas if you've got someone who's extremely talented and just it drives them crazy that they don't win, then they're going to work twice as hard and they're just going to drive themselves to make sure that they, study the tape or do whatever they have to do to make sure that they win, right? Well, business is no different, right? So trying to say, well, we need a really hardworking team, and I'm gonna push my team to be that hardworking team. Truth is, it's not gonna work. You can't if you're a chronically losing football team, you're not going to attract the best players, right? So you know you need to get the right people on the team, and
Yeah.
now you can paint a picture of where we're going to go, but you'd better start making the moves to go there, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got people who are highly motivated, who love what they do. You'll get new people who realize it's what they love to do. I mean, we've again, we hired grads who had no experience. They weren't soccer players. They were never entrepreneurs, right? And they came into the team and they started winning and they started getting excited about it and have dedicated their lives to being entrepreneurs and building winning teams,
Hmm.
right? So, you know, but it really comes down to loving what you do, right? And work-life balance, to me, you're not going to push somebody to work harder ever. It's easy to do your job while not really doing your job. You can get away with it for a long, long time, you
Hmm.
know. So having the right people and being flexible enough. I don't really care if you're working at 3 o'clock on a Friday because you got to pick your kid up, or your husband's sick, or your kid is sick, and you need time. None of that matters to me, right?
Hmm.
The sort of 9 to 5, have to be in the office culture doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is you're there and that you're responsive because because you love what you do, and
Hmm.
you love what you do because you want to be on a winning team of people who are making a difference, and that's infectious. And you can't manufacture that. You pick the right people. That's
Hmm.
important. You you lead, with respect, as we've spoken about, and lead by example,
Hmm.
you know, and you give them the environment that they want, which is that you're going to win. You're doing the thing that you said you were going to do. And it's not necessarily business. Obviously, sports team analogy is an obvious one, but it's true of not-for-profits. I mean, Alacrity is a not-for-profit, and yet we have a highly motivated, extremely hardworking team who love what they do, make incredible difference in the world. There's no way we would have created businesses that are worth, over $1 billion, or attracted, 400 or $500 million in capital with a team of, 5 to 10 people. It's more than that now, but
Yeah.
7 or 8 years ago, that's all it was. We
Yeah.
never would have done that unless we had an incredibly motivated team, and that motivated team loved what they did, and they
Hmm.
never talked to me about work-life balance. If they said, "Hey, I can't be here on Thursday because of," my response is, "Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, you work hard. I know that you work hard. I know the passion is there. So there's no
Hmm.
discussion required about where you need to be or whether or not you're putting the time in. It doesn't even register for me as
Hmm.
something that I have to even discuss with a staff member. If they're doing their job and they're passionate, then it's obvious. And there's no discussion about their time in the office, or no discussion about, whether or not they're getting their job done. Everybody
Hmm.
is punching above their weight. Everybody is doing an incredible job because they love what they do.
Hmm.
And you do that by who you bring to the table and what you represent as a team, and how you're accomplishing it. And some of those things were incredibly hard, and yet at the same time, everybody felt like they could do it. They were encouraged and motivated to do it. They were all allowed to play their role. And then when they win, they all said, "Well, that was great. Let's go do it again." Right?
Right.
And more people want to come onto your team because you're winning. Right? It's like, well, we want to be on that team, and they're
Yeah.
highly motivated, and they get caught up in the culture of it. So
Hmm.
I don't spend a lot of time talking about work-life balance, and as a smart, respected professional, you'll make your own decisions about what you need to do. And if you're overwhelmed or if you're having a difficult time, you know, then you're empowered to say so, and everybody will respond the same way.
Hmm.
We love what you do. We love how hard you work. We love how passionate you are. Of course, take a week or a month or 3 months if it's a very complex problem. Please go and do that. We respect you. We love what you do. Please come back as soon as you can.
Hmm.
And it just, you have the agency to make a determination about your work-life balance. But to me, it never comes out. It's never an issue because people want to be there and they want to be winning and they want to be on a team of people who they respect. Like In most cases, it's your identity. It's the people you spend most of your waking hours with,
Hmm.
and loving that is one of the great pleasures in life.
Mm. So you focus more on finding people that are really connected to their work. They feel a deep sense of energy and motivation and passion about it. It's meaningful enough to them to the point where they are willing to make sacrifices for their work because they're so energized by it. You try to attract and select those people, and then once you attract enough of them, hopefully you build an environment where they feel comfortable, and then you win at some point or you're successful at some point. And then that attracts other people into the
and they
environment. It
and they
becomes a sort of
bring you great
self.
people,
Yeah.
right? They will have
Right.
worked with people in the past. They want those great people on their team. Like
Yes.
it's infectious, which means
Yes.
you need to, as a leader, not just be a great leader yourself, but you have to teach great leadership as you grow.
Hmm.
So, I've had great, team members who become managers who don't necessarily understand how to manage the way I manage. So, when you're a relatively new manager as a high performing employee, I'm busy coaching you on, why do you respect me in the way that I work? Make sure you're respecting your employees the way, I respect you.
Hmm.
And, because again, you don't want people walking away from the organization saying, well, that didn't really work for me and they weren't really nice to me. And, that's not what it's about. If I
Hmm.
if I respect you, I'm never going to tell you to do anything. You know
Hmm.
what you need to do. And if you have questions, you'll come to me and we'll talk about the best course of action. But if
Hmm.
you're enabled to do your job and you have agency over your job, you're going to get on with it. And you're going to feel great that you're empowered to do it. And when the
Right.
company wins, you're going to feel great because you're responsible to contributing to that.
Yeah.
It's, trying to take a large company with I mean, I don't know, I'll pick on the civil service, right? Classically, unmotivated. And, the truth is I found incredibly passionate and motivated people, because we work with lots of, government partners.
Yep.
And, I find unbelievably talented and passionate people who are doing great work. Now,
Hmm.
there's an entire, system set up to treat everybody the same. And, I mean, there's going to be policies and procedures and, it's a huge organization. So that stuff has to exist. And that's just
Hmm.
going to dampen down all innovation and all ability to do anything new. And, so that can be immensely frustrating. So, I mean, I
Hmm.
could probably never do it. At the same time, I find great people who do amazing work and find a way to work inside a very complex system to make a really big difference.
Hmm.
So you want as many of those kinds of people on your team as possible, even inside a civil service department or even inside, a not-for-profit. There are incredible, motivated teams where there's no discussion of work-life balance. There's no, did I get my, X many days of leave or did I, I'm enabled to get off at 4:30 because of, it just we I just don't have those discussions because I don't need to. Because if
Well,
you need to do that, go and do it.
excuse me, and I think that kind of fits with your whole theme around agency. It's a theme that's come up several times in the conversation. It sounds like that's a key principle in your sort of philosophy on leadership and how you think about leadership. It also strikes me that if you take the approach that you're taking, it frees up the CEO or the most senior leader, frees up their time to focus on other things, right? If they don't have to think about motivating or challenging or pushing or pulling their team, and they know that those individuals in their team are self-generating the required motivation and energy, that frees up the CEO to go do other things, market-facing activities, strategic decisions, whatever it might be. So,
Well, Tim, how
uh,
many times have you asked somebody to work hard and tell me, did it work? Like it just doesn't work, right? It's
I,
like, oh, well, I need you
yeah,
to work harder. Okay, well, is that going to have any impact on an employee
I,
ever?
you know what? I've had that conversation with my kids many times, and it never works, right? Just try
Yeah,
harder to do X, try harder to do Y,
yeah,
and
it doesn't work.
no, it's like it's usually a skill deficit.
Yeah,
But
it's like,
but
look what I'm doing. This is what I do every day. I'm an example for what I need you to do. And if you have a problem, if you want to do it, you'll go do it. And if you're
Yeah.
struggling with it, then you can ask for help.
Yeah.
But me telling you to do it or try hard, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. Can I ask you one final question, Owen, before
Sure.
we wind down? And it's just really about some of the influences or people that have influenced you in your career. So I know from your career story that you worked with your father a little bit, who was himself a successful businessman. That really caught my attention because I also was mentored by my father in my professional life. I was just curious, what influence did he have on you in your career? And then also, who else has influenced you and had an impact on you in terms of business, entrepreneurship, investing?
Yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate. Well, in some ways, and maybe not so fortunate in others. I mean, my dad was a very successful entrepreneur. Is a guy by the name of Sir Terry Matthews. Um, I left home quite young to go to school. I was sort of out of the house by the time I was 17. But I did work with him and with his teams when I was very young. I was always, in the office, supporting. I mean, even, when the companies were big and successful, I'd be in on the weekends packaging up product and, labeling shipments and stuff like that. It was just expected that you would do what you could to contribute, and I'd be dragging my friends in for evenings to try and help, package up product and work in the shipping dock and stuff like that.
Hmm,
It was good fun.
interesting.
And that it's where I formed my philosophy of working. It was a great team of people who were really enthusiastic about being successful.
Hmm.
So there were people who worked with me there who were actually working for the organization. Either Mitel in the early days was a very successful company based out of Ottawa. It's still around. Uh,
Hmm.
Newbridge, was a very successful company that my father started, among many many others. But
Yep.
for me, feeling the culture. So I have a very good sense of what a culture feels like when I walk in the room, because I was in very very strong cultures across many many different departments
Hmm.
in rapidly growing successful companies when I was quite young. So my dad was great. At the same time, as a very successful entrepreneur, when I decided to start a company, he called up my investor and told him he was an idiot and shouldn't be investing in my company because I was supposed to be in school. So it wasn't exactly like necessarily the easiest path. Like when I went to go work, my dad, Wesley Clover, is the family office, and he said, go build a portfolio, out on the West Coast, because that's what I think you should be doing. I said, great. Do I have any investment dollars? And he said, no. Like, just go work it out. I didn't need anything. You don't need anything. Just go work it out. And sure enough, that's what built what Alacrity is today. Because I didn't have money to invest in technology companies. I had to come up with a way to build a portfolio of technology companies without the ability to write a check to invest in the company.
Hmm.
So we built a structure that allowed us to do that, allowed us to do some great work, had a huge impact on the economy around us out here. Um, so I've had the privilege of working with some amazing people, and it was they're people that I could call up, and ask questions, who had just gone through so much. So I was very privileged, and a lot of those people were people who were around my dad, right?
Hmm.
So my dad himself took interpretation, right? I mean, he's a businessman from the 70s and 80s. So the work hard because you have to, just because you say it doesn't help, right? You actually have to kind of interpret, um, the philosophy, and he's not very reflective. So, having this conversation, where we're talking about what are the underlying motivations and how to build a team,
Hmm.
he wouldn't have this conversation. He would just say, "Well, you need to work hard," right?
Right.
Because that was what you did in the 70s. And you just tell people to work harder and think it worked. The truth is, he was a great inspirational leader, and he was great
Yeah.
at encouraging people to work hard, and certainly demonstrated that. by example. And he made winning teams. Like he was very strategic about, what markets he went after, very good at generating early sales, which created wins for the team, which then led to more great people coming on the team, and which led to more wins, and
Yeah.
you know so I'm certainly more thoughtful about how I create highly motivated teams, but he was very, very good at it. And
Mm,
I didn't really listen to his advice on how to do it, but I was a witness to him doing it,
mm,
which I think was very helpful. And I've had great people who have worked for me, who generally you wouldn't put this under the category of mentors and advisors, but the truth is I've learned enormous amounts. I was a very young CEO. I was in university, and I worked with people in my first company who were much more experienced than I were.
mhm,
And I had the privilege of hiring people who had a job to do, but at the same time had dramatically more experience than me. And as we've talked about in leadership and cultures, I was the kind of person that would listen, right?
mhm,
So I wasn't a CEO teaching. In many cases, I was hiring very bright people and learning from them because they had dramatically more experience than I had.
mhm.
Ultimately, though, I still made it clear the strategic decision is mine, or the investment decision is mine, or the
Yeah.
distribution of budget and that kind of stuff is my responsibility. But I had the privilege of learning from amazing people that I've worked with over a long career.
Mm. Well, that's interesting because I know in larger mature companies that are highly matrixed, it's kind of a rite of passage for leaders to be moved into a job where they really know nothing about that functional area and then just have to lead it, right? And be the listener, and that they're not the technical expert. And in a way, it sounds like your first leadership experience was very much that, where maybe you knew something technically about what you were doing, but you were also dealing with some really, really highly experienced people that you had to listen to and have your antenna, you know, pointed towards.
Yeah, yeah. So I've
Yeah,
had the privilege of working with great people, and I learned a ton from the CEOs I've worked with.
yeah,
The modern ways of acquiring customers. All of the sort of SaaS methodology changes the way that I invest.
hmm,
Because I was working with teams who were doing a really great job acquiring customers.
hmm,
Paying attention to how they did that was really, really important. Yeah,
hmm,
I've been very fortunate to have
yeah,
worked with great people, and there'd be far too many, to list. But certainly, my father and the people around him, had a great influence on me. Also, saw a whole pile of mistakes and things that I now actively avoid as a result of having seen that work. Right. So,
right.
um, I'm very fortunate, and when you respect people and you pay attention to them, you learn an enormous amount. Everybody
Mm,
has something to teach you. Everybody has different experience, and you can learn from them, and you can take that away and use that in future. And thinking you know it all is a very lonely and and very isolating. With respect to your knowledge and your experience. When
mm,
you're not willing to listen, or you're not willing to respect people and learn from them, then you're never really going to learn anything, new, right?
hmm,
And yes, you can read leadership books and read blogs and do your own research. And I've had management teams that tend to do that, and they come back to me and say, "Well, I've read the book," and like, okay, well, that's great that you read your book and you think you know better, but having done it, 20 times in my career, I think my visceral experience outweighs
hmm,
what an academic wrote in the book, right?
hmm,
Or someone who has a popular writing style, who had a thesis, who wrote the book and became the bestseller or whatever. There might be good information in there, and I don't discourage it, but at the same time, you can't read a book and think you know how to be an entrepreneur, right? It doesn't
Well,
work
you,
that
you
way.
mentioned sometimes the ghostwriters get involved there, right? Too. So
Yeah,
maybe you're reading what the ghostwriter thinks, not what the actual leader
you got
uh,
it.
thinks. But no, I mean, I think I've learned an enormous amount just from this conversation. I think people listening to this watching the video or reading the transcript will learn a great deal from your perspective. And I think every leader in every kind of organization, no matter small or large, is an entrepreneur in some way, shape, or form. They're trying to build up a team, a tight unit around them, and get them to believe in something and get them energized around a task. And so I think a lot of the principles that you describe in these startup companies could be very relevant and generalizable to many people. So I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me, Owen.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
when I talk about CEO, that's the default of clearly the person that's in charge. The truth
yeah,
is, all of this works for, managers, new managers. You know, you've got a team. You can make your team work,
yeah,
and get them to be high performing, and that's the fastest path to you moving up a step. And the better they do, the more likely you are to be able to focus on bigger challenges,
yeah.
and then you're empowered to move up. They're empowered to move up. You can take on bigger challenges and address new things, especially if you're teaching them to be comparable leaders. You don't, I use the CEO, as a metaphor for anybody that has a team.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
this can work at any level.
yeah. No, it's great advice. I think a lot of people are going to get value out of it, and I really appreciate your thoughts on the importance of like fostering agency, um, finding people that are passionate, decentralizing your leadership style, having humility and listening, and not adopting this hero narrative where you feel like you are right and everybody has to get on board with that, but you're actually a sponge and soaking up a lot of information and data around you. So I think these are really valuable principles. So. Oh, and thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it. If people want to learn more about Owen and some of the organizations he's involved with, I'm gonna I'm gonna place or post the websites for the Emend Vision Fund, Alacrity, and Wesley Clover in the article associated with this video. And so you can learn more about Owen and some of his business ventures, and also some of your extensive charitable involvement, I should say. Um, so thank you again for your time, Owen. I really appreciate it. I'm also going to add that if people would like to get in touch with me, you can find my contact information at www.jacksonleadership.com. And if you enjoyed this interview, you can sign up for my newsletter where I post articles from time to time on the topic of leadership. And so that address is www.timjacksonphd.com. And then I guess we should leave with encouraging people to go see The Brutalist, right, Owen?
Yeah,
is that the way to
yeah,
wind this down?
it's actually it's an excellent film. So I got involved in film, is it coaching and supporting my brother. He's younger than I was, and younger than I am, and he needed a bit of support going through some complicated times. It's Hollywood's a tough a tough industry. So I got involved and helped him out, and ended up as an executive producer in a great film. So yeah, go see The Brutalist.
Well, when you said earlier that being a leader is a lot like being a firefighter, I thought you were going to say being a leader is a lot like being an executive producer or something kind of
Yeah, it's very
maybe both.
complicated.
Maybe
Although
both
I'm
could
I'm
work.
not a real producer. I'm just an executive producer. That's the code word for you supported them a little bit, but you didn't actually do the
Yeah,
job of
yeah.
producing. My brother's an actual producer who actually has to do all the complicated stuff, deal with all the egos and all of the fun stuff that comes with Hollywood. I'm very happy in my industry. I get to work with
Okay.
hardworking people, who aren't in their position because they're relatable,
Right,
or
right.
whatever the strange reality of Hollywood. But anyway, so
Yeah.
he gets to work. He has interesting stories about leadership too. Anyway, great to talk to you, Tim.
Thank you so much for your time, Owen. Okay,
Okay,
take
bye.
care. All the best. Bye.